Welcome back to Even Tacos Fall Apart. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today's episode is a raw and real conversation about why we all need therapy and the benefits of collective healing. Life can be tough, and we all face struggles, challenges, and moments where it feels like everything is falling apart. And that's okay. We're all in this together. We're all human, and we're all navigating the ups and downs of life, trying to find our way in this crazy world. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the world of therapy, stripping away the stigma, the shame, and the misconceptions surrounding mental health treatment. Because therapy is not just for the broken or the crazy people, it's for everyone. Therapy is a courageous step towards healing emotional pain, addressing trauma, and finding peace in life's chaos. And it's not always easy. It takes vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we would rather keep hidden. But you know what else it takes? It takes strength, courage, and resilience. Throughout this episode, you'll hear from Phyllis Leavitt, an expert in the field of mental health, as we unpack the importance of therapy, the power of connection with a therapist, and the transformative potential of collective healing. We'll discuss the role of family dynamics, the interplay between nature and nurture, and the impact of societal attitudes towards mental health. We know that therapy is just one piece of the puzzle. Healing is a journey, and it's not something we have to do alone. That's where the collective healing piece comes in. It's about coming together as a community, supporting one another, and creating spaces where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. So whether you're currently in therapy, thinking about starting therapy, or if you're just curious about the world of mental health, this episode is for you. It's a reminder that you are not alone, that your struggles are valid, and that there is hope for healing and for growth. So grab a cup of tea, find a cozy spot to listen, and let's dive into this important conversation about why we all need therapy and collective healing. Because together we can create a world where mental health is not just prioritized, but celebrated. Hello, welcome to another Mental Health Monday. Slay, I see you. Growling, I see you. Why no sound? We were getting ready. That's why, Mental Health Mondays always start with silence, so you can contemplate your terrible decisions so far. No, just kidding. I am very excited for our conversation tonight. We are going to be talking about why we all need therapy and a little bit of the benefits of collective healing. So I've got a wonderful guest here, Phyllis Leavitt. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me as a guest.
Absolutely. A little bit about Phyllis before we dive right in. Phyllis has a master's degree in psychology and counseling from Antioch University. She co-directed the Parents United Sexual Abuse Treatment Program in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 2 years and then went into private practice full time. Phyllis has treated children, families, couples, and individual adults for 34 years and has worked extensively with abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics, their aftermath, and some of the most important elements for healing. She has 2 previous books. One is called A Light in the Darkness, and one is called Into the Fire. And her latest book, which we're going to talk about tonight also, is called America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. And it explores the roots of divisiveness and violence in America from a psychological point of view, with the goal of bringing the best of what heals relationships and restores us to safety into national conversation. Phyllis lives with her husband in Taos, New Mexico, and is now focused on writing and speaking. And I love Taos. I love going there. You know what I love about it? I love that Earthship biotexture compound.
Mm-hmm.
It is so cool to visit.
Yeah, totally.
And I've got some socials here: website, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you would like to connect with Phyllis. Please make sure to give her a follow on all of those platforms if you are so inclined. Phyllis, again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Really, it's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And Tyrion is not over the attention. I told Phyllis, I was like, look, normally by the time we start these, he's calmed down. But today he really, I think because the dogs have been inside all day, it's so cold here. I've had the dogs inside all day. And so he has been feeling like he's not necessarily the center of attention. So I think he wants that attention now. He's like, you got to make up for it. We do have a question queue open. If you are here on Twitch and you would like to ask any questions, type in !Q, follow that with your question and enter it into the chat, and that will get you lined up. But feel free to ask anything. Feel free to engage and make comments or questions or whatever you would like, whether you're on YouTube or Twitch. We are here for that. So Phyllis, can you tell us a little bit more about your experiences and what made you become interested in specializing in mental health to begin with?
Yeah, like so many people, I had a dysfunctional childhood, and really had some trauma in my childhood that affected me very profoundly. And I really knew nothing about psychology. Nobody talked about psychology when I was growing up. It wasn't a subject in school that anyone that I knew did, if that even was there. We just didn't talk about family dynamics. We didn't talk about dysfunctional families. We were all kind of, trying to look good, get a good education, and fit in. And I never felt like I did because I had this sort of buried trauma inside myself and didn't understand who I was, or why I felt so outside of life the way that I did, which I think many child trauma survivors feel. And eventually, I heard about psychology and psychotherapy when I was an adult, and I finally went. By that time, I had 3 children, was married and had 3 children, and I really did not know how to go on with the way that I felt inside. And I ended up going to talk to someone, and I took books out on psychology, and I started reading about our early childhood conditioning and how it affects us. And all of a sudden, my life started to make sense in a way that it didn't ever make sense before. And I did quite a bit of therapy myself, and it was really life-changing for me in terms of my understanding of myself and how to begin to heal and what a healthy lifestyle could look like for me and healthy relationships could look like for me. And then I decided to become a psychotherapist myself. And so I went to graduate school and became a psychotherapist. And so that combination of my own work and working with so many people and seeing how much trauma there is in our country today, I think really worldwide, but how many people are really suffering from very dysfunctional family dynamics and dysfunctional dynamics in their workplace and in their communities. And so I just became aware that our mental health is a phenomenally urgent question to be really discussing and addressing. And I say in America because I live here, but it really is a global issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I feel like so many folks who go into mental health really start from their own background of like, I needed help and someone helped me, or I needed help and I couldn't find that help. So I decided to become that help. And I love just hearing, you grew up in one way and you really could have used the help and you went and got some help later and it was just, eye-opening, right?
Totally.
You need to go. We discussed this. No, we discussed this. Is it emergency? Okay. I love you so much. Go to bed or ask your brother. Nope. Close my door. Goodbye. Good night. Oh, sorry. We've had so many conversations about that.
Not a problem. You're role modeling loving, firm boundaries.
I mean, that's good to hear because boy, do I. My immediate reaction is not so kind.
Oh, you did a good job.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, you were saying.
I don't remember now where we were.
Oh, we can move on. We were just talking about, kind of how people get from a place of need to a place of helping, which is great.
And I think, and I will say one thing about that I think that especially in the world of psychotherapy and any real healing modality, it really is part of a person's training to do their own work.
Mm-hmm.
You don't learn it all in school. You learn good things in school. I learned great things in my graduate program, but I would say that was sort of the base, and the rest, which is a tremendous amount, I learned from doing my own work and from working with other people. Because every person's story is a little bit different. Every
Mm-hmm.
person's need is a little bit different. And so, over time, that's sort of a massive, just like, if you work on computers, you learn the basics, and then you're in there with somebody's broken computer and you learn more, right? And it's even more complicated and deep with our psyches because they're so complex.
Yeah. And I feel like that's true for a lot of things because you can absolutely I went to
Right.
college, I got a degree, I learned some foundational things, right? But for what I
Right.
do every day, I didn't learn what I do every day in college. I learned it on the job.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's
Yep.
exactly what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Hey, Bite Mark, how are you today? Bite Mark would like to know what is your favorite poem?
Oh, you know what? I think I saw that question somewhere and I thought about it. I don't know if I have a favorite poem. This is what I would say in answer to that question. I would say write a poem
Hmm.
because I used to write poetry when I was a teenager. It really was, I don't know why I did. I just had the impulse to do it, but it really was a way that I connected with myself. Like, what is it I want to say? And with words, you can use words like you can use paint or music. You can sort of make your words your paintbrush. And so I don't have a favorite poem, but I would say write a poem and find out, what your deepest heart or spirit or soul wants to express.
I love that because
Like that,
there are a lot of times where, maybe you have a favorite poem, but what does it speak to inside of you? And you can write something that has even
right.
more meaning to you. Uh, Also, I love that. Yeah, you can write your own. That's fantastic. Have you written
And,
poems
sometimes
recently or in your adult life?
not recently. No, I'm focused on writing, books and articles and posts and things like that. But I was just going to add that sometimes when I was working with children, I would ask them to write a poem.
Yeah.
And we would pick a subject or something that was going on in their life. And it really was an amazing way that they could express something that they might not have been able to just say to me in words if we were having a conversation. So no, I don't write poetry anymore, but I think poetry is fabulous.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Bite Mark says, valid answer. Thank you for that. Hey, Deep Parks, how are you today? If you have any questions for our guests, those who are just arriving, if you have any questions, we're talking about why we all need therapy and kind of the collective healing process as a nation. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. We'll make sure to talk about them while we're live here. What is your favorite life hack?
My favorite life hack is walking in the woods or hiking or being in nature. It
Yeah.
really, I am so lucky. I live in Taos, New Mexico. We live up on a mountain and literally National Forest is right outside our door.
Oh,
So
that's
we,
awesome.
we walk down the road and we're on trails. And I just find that so life-giving and peaceful, and it helps me center and calm myself down if I'm stressed. So
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite ones. And I have lots of them. That's
Yeah.
a big one.
I mean, it's one of we've talked about this many times before, I think, but there are studies that show that even just looking at pictures of nature and looking at pictures of trees can be so helpful in grounding
Right.
yourself, in calming yourself, in making sure that your brain like has the space that it needs to process things. So, if you can get out in nature, of course, that's far better. But even if you're not surrounded by trees, even if you're smack in the middle of a downtown somewhere, even there are ways, pull up a video on YouTube that takes you on a walk. There's ways around it. But yeah, I love that so much.
And another good one, and this also gives me great joy. I'm a real plant person, so my house
Mm.
is filled with houseplants. And if you live in the city, get plants.
Yeah. I've got lots of houseplants. Some of them do better than others. I have a tendency to underwater plants, so I try not to get things that have to be watered a whole lot unless they can live in water, or if they go in the snake tanks. If they're going to go in the snake tanks, then they can require a lot of water, because I always make sure that they have a lot of humidity, because they have humidity requirements, right? Every enclosure, each of my kind of snake has a different humidity requirement, different temperature requirement. So I do all this research on like, okay, what plants go well in this temperature and this humidity? So those are the ones that get like, that one has a fern in it, this one has a creeping fig in it. So I can put plants that normally in my house would just die because I would not water them. I can put them in there because I do make sure that they maintain their good humidity and everything. D-Bark says, walk barefoot in the grass, lay down in the grass in the summertime. Nothing like it. Absolutely. Summertime, but not in Texas, because that'll burn you, essentially. But yeah, walking barefoot in the grass, just that connection through your skin, through your eyes, through whatever you can get it through is absolutely helpful. Yeah. Do you have a serial killer or true crime story that fascinates you?
Well, I guess I would say, like, that isn't something that I enjoy. And probably it's just because I've done so much hands-on work with abuse and neglect and violence that it's a little too real for me for for the fantasy of it to be enjoyable. But what I will say about it is that what I'm really interested in, and it's one of the things that I hope that we will become interested in as a collective, as a country, as a human race, as Americans, is really looking into what causes a person to become a killer.
Yeah.
Because it is the mental health issue. People who are mentally healthy, who feel loved, who feel safe, who feel provided for, who feel valued in their lives, who have a sense of belonging, who have learned how to resolve conflict without violence, don't want to kill other people. And so I think we have to understand, and there is research now going on into the lives of some of the mass murderers, or even people who kill one person. And I think we're finding that many, many, many of these people have been abused and neglected, or have been part of drug violence or discrimination, and they have a lot of inside pain inside that ends up coming out as violence. And for me, that's what's fascinating, because once we know what causes something, then we have the opportunity to heal it. We have the opportunity to interrupt that cycle. So that's what really calls to me.
Yeah.
And we read this all the time, that so many of the stories of people who have committed mass murders end up killing themselves. Really, they're suicidal. And suicidal people are insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those things that I feel like the psychology behind the mind is super fascinating. And if we could figure out, what was it that happened to get them to that point, or what was it that happened in their childhood, in their day, whatever it was, yesterday, today, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. But I also think that it's really interesting how everyone has a different reaction to this question, because we've had so many people who are same field, right? In the mental health field, some people are super passionate about, oh, I love watching true crime, investigations, that kind of thing. And some people are like, I don't want to deal with it anymore. I deal with it all day. I see it all day. And then there's people like me who have been through a lot of shit. And it's like, okay, I've been through so much that what fascinates me is seeing all the investigations, seeing the mystery around it, and having an inside understanding of how a family is dealing with a situation like this, or how a person is dealing with something like this. So I love all the different reactions to this question. That's why I still ask this question.
Right. Yeah, and I think if the purpose is to really understand it more deeply, I think that's great. I think for somebody like me, I can just get so sensitized that we can't turn it off. It's just hard for me to put it out.
Yep, that's totally valid. It is not a thing for everybody, and that's okay. All right, well, we're gonna switch a little bit to the topic of tonight, and that is why we all need therapy. And if you were encountering someone who had no idea what therapy was, how would you describe the core purpose of therapy For someone who might be either considering it for the first time and they're just like, I don't know what to do next. I heard that someone else tried therapy. How would you describe the core purpose of therapy?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of what brings people to therapy is that something in their life really isn't working. Just like we go to the doctor if something is causing us endless pain in our body. Um, and I think people come to therapy generally when something really isn't working and it's causing them emotional pain. And so often what we find is that, and this is what therapy really addresses, what are those formative experiences that we each had? What did we learn about ourselves? What did we learn about our value? How did we learn to cope with conflict? How did we learn were the roles for men and women? What's expected of us in terms of, when we become adults and who we become and what is success? How do we view people that are different from us? What do we do? What do we do if we have a problem? Is it okay to say I'm unhappy or I need something or not? So we all have very complex structures of the way that we were conditioned. And to the extent that those conditioning agents aren't healthy, we got messages like you're stupid or you're fat or you're ugly or you'll never amount to anything or everything's your fault and, why were you ever born? And believe me, people get messages like this. More people than you would like to think get horrible messages about who they are and what they're worth and if they're even lovable or wanted. So the extent to which we get negative messages about ourselves growing up, whether it's from our family of origin or our community or the kids at school or in the workplace or in a partnership or wherever it is, most of us internalize those messages. They become our truth. They become our truth. And obviously, the good messages we get also become our truth. But people don't come to therapy because they've gotten a lot of good messages.
Right.
They come to therapy about the negative things that have really conditioned their life, because this is what happens. When we take in these negative messages about who we are and how we should be, who other people are, we all unconsciously, even a 1-year-old, even a baby, that we all start to develop a way that we cope with. It's sort of like being given bad food, but we can't help it. We're ingesting it because it's part of the food we're being given. And we have a reaction. And one of the reactions is we decide, usually very unconsciously, how we're going to cope with that. One person copes by withdrawing and isolating. One person copes by becoming very aggressive. One person copes by being a people pleaser. One person copes by being a workaholic or an addict or a criminal, or victimizing other people. So we all cope in different ways, but they're all coping strategies with something that was harmful to our psyche. All of them. If we become a people pleaser, it's coping with pain. If maybe we couldn't please people enough, so we just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, or we felt like that's the only way we could be valued by other people or fit in. And some people identify with the aggressor because they're so afraid of their own vulnerability that they have to mask that with being overpowered and being aggressive toward other people. But the important point is, for your question is, we sort of develop an inner pattern, each person. This is what I've come to believe about myself that's not good, and this is how I cope. And that becomes an unconscious pattern that gets repeated over and over and over again. These are the people I'm going to be drawn to. They might be people that, if one of my coping mechanisms was to become very passive and submissive because I'm afraid to stand up for myself or I don't really believe I ever had any power, I'm probably going to be drawn to people who want to dominate me. If I become a workaholic, I might end up with a boss who just demands, more and more and more and more of me, and I'm just going to keep on that wheel, trying to run faster. So we develop these patterns that starts with a negative belief about myself, coping mechanisms I've developed, and the experiences then I have by manifesting those coping mechanisms in the world usually reinforce the negative belief that I've had about myself. It becomes like a rut in the road that I can't get my wheels out of.
Yeah.
So by the time people come to therapy, they've repeated this pattern over and over again, and they don't know why they're stuck in it. They don't know how to get out of it. And they start to blame themselves or feel really badly often for not being able to do it differently, not being able to attract a better partner, not being able to parent their children better, not being able to be more successful at work or be more expressive in their creativity or just be happier. And so the best therapy, I think, really unearths that whole inner structure. What did you come to believe about yourself? How did you learn to cope? What is that producing in your life? And can we interrupt that pattern and change it? Because that's really what people come to therapy for. And so I'll just say it this way, and there's many other ways we could talk about what therapy does, but I think this is a very succinct and helpful way to talk about it. Negative beliefs we took on about ourselves aren't true, but they feel true. Somebody tells you you're stupid from the time you're 2, or they tell you you're worthless because you have dark skin, or you have a mole on your face, or you are dyslexic and you're not functioning well in the kind of academic system we have. We tend to believe that. But it's not the truth about who we are. We're all innocent, pure, beautiful human beings. And I really believe that. I don't believe there's a baby born on this earth that isn't an innocent, pure, beautiful human being. And we become sort of distorted and warped because of the bad things that happen to us from other people. So the best therapy really helps people understand that what we come to believe about ourselves is not true. And through different processes, not always just through talking, but sometimes through talking, but good processes like hypnosis and EMDR and inner child work and psychodynamic therapy or behavioral therapy. There's many different forms of therapy that all, I think if they're effective, they all address that core structure that needs to be taken apart and reworked so that the goal of therapy is that we leave therapy believing something positive about ourselves. And it's not in a fantasy, but it's the truth of who we really are. Because those positive beliefs will generate positive coping mechanisms, and we'll start to do our life differently. And I can tell you from my own work that is really what I experienced. I really got to the core of the very, very deep negative beliefs about myself and the ways that I cope, which in my case were, and I say this gratefully, I do not have a body that likes drugs and alcohol. And if I did, I might have used, but my body just rejected that. So that was never a road I went down. And I really became kind of a people pleaser and, a very good student and sort of like high functioning. But inside I had tremendous pain. I really wasn't functioning all that well in my emotional world, but that might not have been what people saw. That's what I lived. And so taking that all apart in the ways that I did, in the work that I did a lot of inner child work, a lot of hypnotic kinds of work, and reprocessing those old belief systems so that I really came out, free from some of that. Is it still affects me? Yeah, because we're human. We can't totally erase our past, but it doesn't have to dominate the present.
Yeah.
That's really, I would say, in essence, what one way of saying what good therapy has to offer, that we rework the things that we internalize that are crippling us in our present life today. And it's possible to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said a couple things that I want to touch on. The first one is a comment. The other day, I think it might have been yesterday on Twitter, there was someone who posted, "Look, my illness is invisible, and sometimes I wish it weren't," because people really can discount whenever you are. Right. You were talking about being high functioning and how you can't see it from the outside, and sometimes it's easier to say, oh, you broke your arm, let me help you with this, than to say, oh, you're depressed, but you're doing fine. Like, look, you've got a great job, you've got great kids, you got your shit figured out,
Right.
everything's working just fine. And it's like, yeah, but I hurt on the inside. So what that part of what you said, like, really resonated with me, because it's very true. Just because it looks like you've got it all figured out on the outside doesn't mean you're not hurting on the inside, and doesn't mean that there aren't some things that you still are working on or still need to address. And then you also mentioned several different types of therapy. So can you kind of talk about, how does someone know which approach to therapy might be beneficial for them, or what should people start with in general?
I'll say something from a little bit of a different angle. I think the most important thing to start with is not the method of therapy. It's the person you're working with.
I like that.
I think it's really, really important to feel there's a connection, to feel that there's, that the person sees you, that this person gets you, and that they have enough experience to go where you need to go. And I'll say this for myself, like, I did many different methods of therapy in the time, and I saw many different therapists over a number of years. And the person was the most important thing. It really, really was. And if you don't jive with somebody, it doesn't matter what method they do. Don't go there. Not every therapist is for every person. And one of the things that was really important for me is because I was really in pain when I went to therapy, like deep pain. And I needed to know that person could hold it. It didn't matter what method they used. I needed to know as a person they could hold that pain, that they were not going to judge me for it, that they were not going to think I should be better tomorrow, that they could actually walk with me through, the valley of the shadow of death that I needed to walk through. And not everybody feels that way about why they go to therapy, but many people actually do feel that way. Like, it's a really deep dive into an underworld that is scary. And so that's what I would say. There's lots of good therapies out there. As I mentioned, EMDR I think is fabulous. Psychodynamic therapy is wonderful. Inner child work is invaluable. Hypnosis is wonderful. And some people, like myself, I kind of more, merged a lot of those different techniques together in the way I work with people. So that's really my best answer. The therapist is the key.
I like that a lot. And that's something we've talked about here before as well, is just, if there's something that's not jiving with your therapist, then fire them and try someone else. Like, it's okay. Right. You're not going to get along with everybody. As much as I personally, people pleaser that I am, would like to get along with everyone and would like to be able to make progress with everyone, the fact is, I had a terrible therapist with my first experience with therapy. She was awful. And I'm sure for some people, that's her methods were exactly what they were going to need. But for me, it was annoying and not helpful at all. And so I didn't understand at that time, that was a long time ago, I didn't understand at that time that I could just get a different therapist. But that's something that you can absolutely do. If you don't get along with one therapist, it's not that therapy is not for you, it's that therapist is not for you. So yeah, that's a great point. Are there any misconceptions about therapy that you often encounter, and how do you clarify those, if so?
Well, I think there's two big misconceptions that I've encountered. And one is that therapy is a sign of weakness, that we should be able to get it together ourselves, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get over it, it's over, it's in the past, put it in the past, those kind of things, stop acting like a victim. I mean, all these messages that are quite rampant in our society still, even with how much therapy has gained, legitimacy in our world. Those messages are still out there, that it's a sign of weakness and that we really should be able to do it ourselves. And that's just simply not true. It takes enormous courage and strength to take a deep dive into healing. Just like sometimes it takes enormous courage and strength to get surgery or to undergo a medical procedure that's painful. but we do it because we want to heal. And it takes the same courage and strength to do the healing work for our psyches and our hearts and our emotions. So that's a big one. The other one that and I don't encounter that in my office because people who really feel that way don't come.
Yeah.
You know, I just know that that's out there. The one that I encounter more in my office is I'll have people that come in and they're really in pain, right? They've gotten themselves there, but they'll say to me something like, I don't really want to need therapy. I want to need it. I don't want to look needy in the world. I feel like we have this big stigma around what we call needing it. And when the truth is, and of course, there's, you know, if I'm needy like a 2-year-old, it's probably not fun for the people around me. But we actually really do need each other. And one of the things that I would say about healing and psychological healing is the greatest wounds that we suffer that bring us to therapy are the wounds we've suffered with other people who have hurt us, who have neglected us, who have abused us, who have not seen us for who we really are, or have, you know, just ostracized us or hurt us in many betrayed us. You know, all the ways that we can hurt each other. And so, because our wounds come from other people, we need to heal with other people. That healing journey, part of that, and that's why I say the therapist is so important. The techniques are important too, and there are some really good techniques out there. Why the therapist is so important is because you want to work with someone that you actually feel can help you heal. Someone who does see you, someone who looks at you and they want the best for you. And they want to support your strength. And they want to see you actually walk out the door and not need them anymore.
Yeah.
You know? And so I say to people, why don't you want to need therapy? You don't mind needing a car mechanic. You don't mind needing your computer expert. You don't mind needing a doctor. Why do you fear needing someone to help you heal your heart?
Yeah. And I mean, the brain is such a big part of everyone's life. Like it's the thing that drives your whole being. And so why wouldn't you want some help with that?
I think we just have to keep talking about it and normalizing it and talking about it as a good thing, not as like something you should be ashamed of or you shouldn't tell anybody you go to therapy.
I agree. And the more that I've talked about therapy and mental health around people, the more people are willing to open up about their own experiences. And it's been a long time. I mean, so probably when I had my oldest, it was still very much like, we don't talk about postpartum depression. We don't talk about any of this stuff. We don't talk about that. But by the time I had my youngest, I was actually treated for my postpartum depression at that time. And by the time I had him, like my OBGYN was just like, girl, you have postpartum depression. Here, we're gonna treat this. Right. And so like even from a provider standpoint, that was amazing. But then to also be able to bring it up later and say, I'm dealing with postpartum depression, and for someone like my mom to be like, oh, well, let me know if there's anything I can do to help, or a coworker to say, oh shit, I've been there too. Like those are conversations that just in the past 10 years have really started to be more widely acceptable. And I really think that if we can just continue having those conversations, it's really going to keep opening it up more and more, which is wonderful.
You know, I was just watching a couple of segments of an Oprah Winfrey series. I don't remember which channel it's on, but it's all about mental health. And one of the things that was so wonderful about it, the people that she interviewed were all very, very open. But she interviewed people like Lady Gaga, you know, and I think that's a tremendous service because it takes it out of the realm of stigma. If Lady Gaga can talk about being abused and being traumatized and really having to work hard to help herself on her mental health and heal her heart and her mind and her, you know, her whole psychological being, then I think it really helps normalize it for everyone. Yeah. And so that's another way that it's sort of coming out of the shadows into mainstream thinking. And the more the better.
Yeah. Yeah, that representation really does matter because if there's someone who is depicting a mental illness accurately on a show versus depicting a mental illness inaccurately on a show, it makes a difference in whether or not you can see yourself in that position. But then
That's
also,
right.
like, even basic representation. So my oldest is trans, and seeing someone who's trans be on a mainstream show and talk about their transition or talk
Right.
about how they arrived there. And then my youngest has Tourette's syndrome, and we watched this show called Glow Up, which is a wonderful show. But there was a makeup artist who had Tourette's syndrome, and it was a guy, and he was very open about it, and they showed him having tics and everything. And then there's that singer. He's got the red hair. I'm not going to think of his name right now, but there's a singer not besides um oh, anyway, there's a singer who has red hair, who has Tourette syndrome, and there's a great video of him at a concert where he was having severe tics and could not continue to sing, and the audience just sang the whole song, and it was incredible.
Oh,
And to be able to see things like that, to be able to see accurate depictions of both physical illnesses and mental illnesses and just general challenges and diversity, it's gotten so much better lately. Like, all these little things make me so happy, and I can't wait to see more and more of that because that trend, I'm hoping, just continues to grow because it really does make a huge difference.
I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things I love that you shared, I didn't know about that concert or what happened with the people taking over and singing.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that's really beautiful about that example that you just gave is that all the love the person receives.
Yes.
And because that's what we all need. And that's
Yep.
what I keep saying. You know, the best food for human beings is love.
Yeah.
It's what makes us the healthiest.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to like Google on the side here who that was because it was really beautiful. I'll find a link and send it to you later because
Okay, great.
it was really wonderful and it was just so powerful too. All right, well I'll get us back on track. So if you're thinking about therapy and we've already talked about how it's very beneficial and everyone deals with things differently, is there ever a time where therapy would not be recommended for someone?
Well, there may be times that I'm not aware of, but I think the ones that I'm most aware of are if someone's really active, like a heavy duty addiction, they probably can't make use of therapy. They
Hmm.
need to get sober or be in some kind of different kind of treatment, um, and and just get their body back in some kind of receptive state. That's a big one I can think of, and I think there might be people that are, um, that are suffering from severity of like schizophrenia or something like that, where they need to do medication first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but generally, the population of people that I worked with over the years weren't people that were, that would fall into any of those categories. And I mean, I don't think I've ever had someone come to therapy and I said, you're not ready or you're not right.
Yeah.
The person wants help and they're basically sober. I mean, I'm not talking about they have a drink in the evening. Um, they're basically sober and they're not hurting other people. They're not actively hurting
Yeah.
other people. That'd be another one person that needs to be restrained from being abusive toward others. They need their therapy, but they need a certain kind of restraint first.
Yeah.
Um, I just have never had anybody that I would have said, you're not ready for therapy. If you want it, you're in pain, and you're willing to come, and you're willing, however minimally or maximally, you're able to do the work, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
Because really, who are
definitely,
we to judge? Who are we
yeah,
to judge?
yeah, absolutely. There are, there's definitely instances where a different intervention is necessary first before therapy. And I think
Right.
that that's something that probably has even more stigma than going to therapy is the immediate interventions that are sometimes required. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation probably.
But I think that's a really good conversation. And I'll
Hmm.
just say a little bit about it. So if a person is actively using cocaine or they've beaten their kid and there needs to be some kind of
Yeah.
intervention to make their child safe, yes, we have to know, and this is something that I really emphasize in my book America in Therapy. we have to know that when people are in those kinds of dire straits and maybe really hurting other individuals, they need help. Therapy is actually something that they really need. And I really believe that as a society, we have to stop blaming and blaming our worst offenders. And that's a hard thing to do. If somebody gets out of a classroom, it's really hard to have empathy for them.
Yeah.
And of course, they have to be accountable for what they did if they don't kill themselves first. Of course they do. And at the same time, we have to look at what happened to them that set them up to be so disconnected from themselves, in so much pain, so unable to find help or belief in themselves, or so hating themselves. Whatever it is, we have to figure out what happened to them so that we can help prevent that for more and more people and help them. Even if a person has to stay in prison because they've murdered people, and we don't know how to, make them safe enough to be back out in society, they still deserve help. There's still a hurting human being in there. And I really believe that we have to change our criminal justice system to a system that is dedicated to rehabilitating people. Because there are many people in prison today who could be functional, constructive participants in our society, and they don't need to spend their life or years and years in prison. And I think we have to really relook at how we look at people, because so many people that are in jail today are unhealed victims of abuse and neglect, and discrimination and poverty and whatever. And so one thing that I would love to add to that I talk about also in my book, is that in a family, so what I've done with my book, American Therapy, is take the lens of family systems, what we know about what makes a family healthy, and what helps create a dysfunctional or abusive family, and really look at what those elements are. What do we need to have healthy families? What are the things that tear us apart and destroy families and create violence and abuse and neglect? And even whether it's emotional abuse and neglect or physical or sexual abuse, we really need to understand what causes that. What happens to a person that they would become a perpetrator? So when we work with an individual family, and I don't know how widespread this understanding that I'm going to share with you is, but it's one of the things I would like to have be widespread.
Yeah.
And that is, so I'll give you a good example. I work with a family, and often the child is referred for therapy. In the beginning of my practice, I worked almost exclusively with children. So I would have, almost all the children that got referred to me were suffering from a consensual divorce. That was the main cause. So there was nothing wrong with the children. They were suffering because their parents were at war with each other, or not talking, or the child had become a pawn in the divorce and custody battle, or something like that had happened. But there was nothing wrong with the child. The child didn't actually need therapy. The parents needed therapy. The child was the one who became symptomatic. They became, the children that I saw, they became aggressive in school, or they were talking baby talk and they were 6 years old, or they had no friends, or they wouldn't do their homework, or they were hitting other children, or they had tremendous fears of the dark or spiders or something. And so they would be brought to therapy, like, fix my kid, they're wetting the bed, they're 10 years old. And so what we realize from psychology today and our whole study of family systems is that the one who is the most symptomatic is actually calling for help for the family. And that is also true in society. Those who are most symptomatic, the mass murderers, the people who are exploitive, who are sexually deviant and abusing other people, who traffic children, who, we could name a million things that people do that are so horrific. They are actually the ones calling for help for the family of America, or the family of their community, not just their family of origin. And that's why I wrote the book, because we have to understand that the terrible things that are happening are part of a family system in this country that isn't working for a lot of people. So I'll give you a good example. And this is how I learned this from working with kids. I had a little girl that was brought to therapy for having this syndrome. I think she was 10. I don't remember how old she was, but she was around that age. And first I just had the parents come in and because I always get a history. What do you think is going on? Why do you think she's wetting the bed? And they were like, no, we really just don't know. Everything's fine. And I asked and didn't get anything, right? And then I did this thing called a family sculpture. I had the whole family come in, and it was the mother and the father, the little girl, and her two siblings. So I did this thing where you ask each person to just make a little theme or something about the family. Really, it's very non-directive. And you just want to see what people will express. And so the mother went, the father went, and they all did, the two siblings went, and they all did something like, we're sitting around the table having dinner, we're doing our homework, we're taking the dog for a walk, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what is wrong with this picture? What is somebody not saying, right? And I'm thinking that. And the last person to go is this little girl. She puts her mom on one side of the room, her dad on the other side of the room, and she has them scream at each other about their drug abuse. And, I don't even know if he would have told me.
Yeah.
But in that situation, and then, of course, the work was with the parents. I did a little bit of work with that little girl, but the work was with the parents, and they both came from highly dysfunctional families. They had no idea how to deal with their own addiction problems. They had no relationship skills. And they needed a lot of help. But who was the symptom there? Little girl.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, a lens that we have to bring to our larger social group, the school yard, to places of business, corporations, to houses of worship, and to our country. Who are the most symptomatic people, and what is it they're really calling for help for?
Mm-hmm.
I think we know the answer to that. We know some of the answers. They're calling for help for discrimination, for poverty, for not having access to education or medical care or adequate housing or food or justice, And I think we have to start listening.
Yeah. So, there's the whole nature versus nurture discussion. How much do you feel like it is nurture over nature?
I love that topic, and I actually wrote a whole chapter that never got its way into my book. So it'll have to be in the next one, but it was on nature and nurture because I do think it's a very, very important issue.
Mm-hmm.
And we can debate that issue till the cows come home.
Yeah.
This is my take. I'm having 3 children myself. I definitely feel like they were each born with a different nature.
Yeah.
Just came out of the womb different people, right? And there's just sort of no denying that. That being said, so some people, probably are more aggressive by nature. Some people may be more shy by nature. Some people may be more extroverted or introverted or creative or right brain or left brain or whatever. I think we are. I think we have all these basic intrinsic differences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our nurture is what we actually have control over.
Yeah.
How we treat people is what we can do something about. If someone is born more aggressive, let's just say, than the next person, we can still, like you just did with your son, you were firm, you were clear, you weren't abusive, you didn't say nasty things to him, you weren't hurtful, you didn't hit him, but you made it very clear that he had to restrain his impulse in that moment, that when his impulse was out of line with what needed to happen, right? And we can learn those skills with people, and I'm not using your real, I'm saying how you did it was great.
Yeah.
I'm not saying your son has a problem. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? Like, the way we nurture each other has everything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So someone may be shy and more withdrawn by nature, and we could let them stay alone in their room for 18 years till they leave home, or we could nurture them to come out and make it safe and find out what they need. And, are they oversensitive to too much stimulation? Did something happen to them in school that made them afraid of people? We can nurture each other back to health.
Yeah.
We can do that. So to me, nurture is what we have some control over.
Mm-hmm.
A very hostile, aggressive person can learn to restrain their most aggressive impulses. A very submissive person can learn to stand up for themselves and have a voice. And that's the beauty of the work of psychology, is that we help bring people back to some healthy medium.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I view both of my children as, one is 10, one is 17, but it's like they're not going to have full impulse control until they're in their 20s. They're just not. It's a skill they're going to have to learn. And it's something that with 10-year-old, we're still working very hard on it. With 17-year-old, it's a little less intense lately. But yeah, I mean, I really view my my kids as they've got their own tendencies. They are two completely different kids, totally different from one another. And so I work with them differently based on their individual needs. And I think a lot of the time that's what winds up missing, is that you're not catering to what an individual needs. You're saying, well, this worked for so-and-so. Why isn't it working for you? And I think that's the nice part about therapy, is that the therapist, if you're working with a therapist who you like, who you get along with, the therapist really is going to adjust that to what you need and what's going to be beneficial to you. And that may mean trying a bunch of different things, but yeah.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah. Are there practices from general therapy kind of practices that would be beneficial for everyone, whether they are in therapy or not in therapy? Is there anything that could be helpful?
In terms of healing, in terms of enhancing our mental health?
Yeah. I mean, it could be, a recommendation for self-care, a recommendation for a certain practice that you think everyone could benefit from, or really anything.
I think that there are lots of things. I mean, I think having the opportunity to be creative in whether it's music or art or dance or theater or, anything creative. I think creativity is healing. And we know this, and there are places where, and I read books on this when I was in graduate school, where people are inpatient because of psychiatric disorders, and they actually healed something doing art therapy. And what they drew was their trauma, and then they drew themselves out of their trauma. And so, creative expression is a fabulous healing modality. Being in nature is a fabulous healing modality. Helping others can be a fabulous healing modality. So there are lots of things like that. There are other healing modalities. There's body work. There are other therapies besides psychotherapy that people do. Sometimes spirituality is very healing. And what I will add to that is that for really severe trauma, those things may not be enough. They may be really helpful. They may be really helpful, is what I would say. But getting down to the core wound and releasing the pain of being violated or hurt by other human beings sometimes just really needs to be done in a safe container with another person.
Yeah.
And so all those other things can be wonderful adjuncts, and there may be people that totally heal that way. But if you've tried those things and you have early trauma, or you have present-day trauma, if you've tried those things and they haven't really brought the relief or the healing that you desire, it's not because you're a failure. It's because you really just need something else.
Yeah. Now, if we're talking about therapy and kind of going to therapy and starting to address something, of course, it's going to depend on an individual. But is therapy forever? How long does it normally last? And how would you recommend that people track their progress during the therapeutic process?
I think there is no way to set a time frame. There are people who do 6 sessions and they're good to go. you know? And there are people who are in therapy for 10 years who have had massive abuse from early childhood on, sexual abuse, physical violence, witnessing murders. I mean, you can't, if someone has suffered in that way, you can't say they should be done in 6 months or a year. We really don't know. And that's part of what I think a good therapist offers is, I'm here with you as long as you need me. And not because I want to extend therapy or get paid longer or anything like that, but because I will see you through to whatever the other side is for you.
Yeah.
So I think it's important really not to put a time frame on it. And I think how you know that therapy is working, I think there are a couple of ways. But one of the big ways that you know therapy is working is something's changing. So I'd love to tell this story. I had a woman that I saw years and years ago whose mother was just emotionally so cruel to her, put her down constantly. You know, wouldn't feed her a lot of food because she said she was too fat. You know, so she would be sitting at the dinner table and have carrots and celery on her plate while the family was eating a meal. So so she had become a pleaser. That was what she had become. She kind of held herself inside. She didn't express herself. She tried not to take up too much space. And she just tried to give other people what they wanted. And we did EMDR together. That was the method that we chose. And I don't remember how many sessions we did. It wasn't too many. You know, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 sessions. And she came in one day and she had gone away to visit a friend. Well, actually not to visit a friend, but to stay in a friend's place who was away. She went to and stayed in this person's place. And she came back and she said, "Phyllis, the house was a mess. There was cat hair everywhere. The refrigerator was and the stove were disgusting." And she looked at me and she said, "And I didn't clean it."
Wow.
And that was a breakthrough for her.
Yeah.
That was a breakthrough. And, you know, and so it can be something, and that's not a little breakthrough, it's a big one. But it can be something relatively little. It can be, I left this relationship that I've been trying to leave for 5 years. I finally left. It can be something big. But you see something change. It doesn't mean that all the pain leaves immediately. But either you feel like I'm getting to the truth, I'm treating my husband differently, I understand my child better, I have more compassion for myself, I'm nicer to the people at work, whatever it is. You see something begin to shift.
Yeah. And I think that that's really important. Like, the different breakthroughs that I've had in therapy are ones that my therapist and I kind of celebrate together. So it's really nice to have those moments where you talk to your therapist about the things that are happening, but also there's lots of little things that happen and your therapist might never know about them, but you know about them, and you can kind of tell, you know, if something's helping, if it's working. And you can always work with your therapist to try something different if you feel like you're not making progress fast enough. But the one thing that I want to point out is that at no point, Phyllis, did you say it's one and done. We're going to have one session and you're going to be, everything's going to be hunky-dory, fixed, fine, all good. Now, I will say, so my 17-year-old is in therapy. My 10-year-old is not in therapy, but I do like a 6-month check-in with a therapist with him, mostly because he likes to go play with the clay. You know, whatever, it's fine.
Right.
But I do a 6-month check-in with him, like going to the dentist. And so there are times that I think it doesn't hurt to check in with a therapist and say, like, hey, how am I doing? Here's how I handle things. How do you think that that's something that I need to work on? And just doing a checkup like that is kind of a one and done, right? But if you are going to therapy to seek something out, you know, you mentioned 6 sessions, you mentioned 10 years. It just depends. It depends on what you're working on.
Totally.
It depends on how long it is, but it does take work and it does take effort on your part. So I think that's really important to note.
Not to judge how long it takes.
Yeah.
It's not like it should be sooner or it should take longer.
Yeah.
It's individual. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're someone who has extensive experience in mental health from both the patient side and the provider side, which we talked about at the very beginning. Where do you see the future of conversations around mental health heading both individually and nationally?
I think, and my hope is that mental health will start to take center stage
Mm-hmm.
because I actually believe at this point, from seeing how the largest systems are working on so many dysfunctional and abusive family dynamics, that we really have to heal our mental health to survive. I actually really think that that's going to be the truth. We never advocate that people go to war when they come for healing. We never advocate that they assault each other, that they call each other names, that they lock each other out of the house, that they starve someone. And yet we do these things as a country, and we do them to masses of people. We do things to other people that we would never want to have be done to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that disconnects the mental health issue. And the other big thing that I really like to say, and there's several, I guess, but the other one that comes to my mind right away is that we're in this, very vitriolic partisan divide right now in
Mm-hmm.
our country. And it's like two warring parents in a family. And when parents are warring in a family, their children become symptomatic and they become distressed and they act out or they act in or they fail to thrive. And that's what's happening to a lot of people in our country. Not to everyone, but it's happening to a lot of people in our country. And even people who are not directly affected by some of what's going on from the top down, the lives are, functioning, their jobs are working, they have enough money. Um, I've said this many times on many of the shows that I've talked on, but it wasn't until the campaign for the 2016 election that I ever had one client come to therapy feeling traumatized by the politics in our country.
Wow.
And I have people who would come in and say they can't sleep and they're just so afraid of what's going to happen in the election and what's happening to America. Really, really traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have to look at the way we behave as a nation and the way our leaders behave and change our expectations of how we want our largest institutions and our leaders to run the
Mm-hmm.
country and behave. Um, and so what I say is that psychology is not partisan. Psychology is all about healing relationships, helping people listen to each other, work out their problems, come to some agreement, have empathy and deeper understanding for each other and each other's position or their conditioning or their values. And I feel like we need to bring that to a national discourse because what we're modeling right now is that power lies in beating your partner, in shaming and blaming and, saying horrible things or taking violent actions toward other people. And we know in the world of psychology that these things are not only not healing, but they produce more of the same. And
Mm-hmm.
so my hope is that our mental health, our collective mental health, the family of America, and how we run as a family really takes center stage. And that actually is the real reason I wrote America in Therapy,
Yeah.
because I want this understanding to be part of a national conversation.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that individuals can affect these kinds of changes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can each affect our environment. You know that when you're on it in a really great way, like you just were with your son, you're changing his life. He is internalizing better boundaries without being harmed.
Mm-hmm.
He's internalizing better boundaries while he is still being loved, right? You're affecting his life. He is going to grow up to be a better person because he has you for a mother. So we can affect the people around us.
Yeah.
And some of us have, little influence. We have friends, we have our kids, our spouse, we have the people we work with, and that's pretty much our sphere of influence. If we're loving and kind and generous and thoughtful if we have good boundaries, if we come up against a conflict with someone and we work it out peacefully and lovingly, and our commitment is to come back together and honor and each other, and reconnect and maintain the relationship, who knows what the ripple effect of that is? And if we're someone who has a great influence, where we have a public office, or we run a large business, or we're a teacher in school, or we're running an ER, and we have hundreds of people that we affect. If we are modeling, if we heal our own wounds, I'll start there. If we heal our own wounds and we're modeling loving, kind, peaceful, non-conflictual, non-violent human relations, the ripple effect is massive. We can, and really, what is our country? It's a mass of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So if the individuals in the country become healthier and healed, and they spread that out, that's part of healing our country. And then really demanding that of the people in positions of power.
Mm-hmm.
But we can only do that, I think, to the extent that we can start to embody that, the collective ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that, you may feel like you don't have very much influence. You may feel like there's no way I can change a national narrative. There's no way that I can really make a difference. Or there's lots of sentiment. So I'm in Texas, and there's lots of sentiment that my vote won't count because I'm in Texas, and that may be generally true for some elections, but you always have a local election that you can vote in where your vote does truly count. There were elections in this last election cycle where a candidate won or lost by 1,000 votes. Like, that's such a small margin, that your voting power really does matter. But it's not just about the voting power. Right. It is, like you're saying, about the influence you have on people around you, and whether that's a friend or a family member or whatever it is. Yeah, I feel like you just modeling the behaviors is something that you have the power to do. And then you talked about, therapy and kind of healing yourself. So is that the way that if a healed person is out there influencing other people, is that kind of how you see that personal level of connection helping America in general?
Absolutely. I'll tell you a very, very specific example that I think could be, it could be expanded like a million times. I worked with a woman who was very depressed. She had been a single child, an only child of a single mom who was very depressed and very unavailable. And she kind of grew up as a loner. Her mom didn't invite kids over to play with her. She just was kind of a loner and depressed like her mom. And she ended up getting married and having a child and getting a divorce. And she was that depressed mom for her child. And she got a job as a manager in a small office. And she told me all this in the therapy process. So she got a job as a manager in a small office, and a woman came to work in the office who was very, very insecure. And she hated her. She just couldn't stand this woman. And what she realized in therapy is that the woman reminded her of herself, because she was really insecure and didn't have good self-esteem and didn't know where she fit in and felt rejected and, whatever. But she didn't realize it at the time. And what she told me was that she really didn't pay any attention to this woman. She didn't praise her. She didn't give her any promotions. She just kind of pushed her away until the woman finally left. And in therapy, when she got in touch with her lonely, insecure little girl self, this woman sort of flashed before her awareness, and she realized what she had done. And she felt tremendous remorse that she had treated her so unkindly, because she realized that woman needed exactly what she had needed and not gotten, and that what she was needing now and wasn't getting. And she really turned around the way she treated the people that worked for her after that. And it was her healing, and it was too late for the person who had left. But For all the people that were still in her office, she changed the way she was a manager.
Mm-hmm.
She started acknowledging people and praising them and making them feel like they belonged and wanted, all the things that she had needed herself. So one person's healing journey can help heal many and can spread that healthy, loving, inclusive human dynamic to many, many people. And who knows the ripple effect of that? They went home and were kinder to their family because they felt appreciated at work.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we all have enormous power, and it doesn't matter how large or small your sphere of influence is. Smile at somebody in line in the grocery store. It makes their day.
Yeah. That's, that's one of those things. It's like, think about how much harm you can cause to someone by honking or rude gestures or cutting someone off or angry driving. Right. You can start someone's day off, someone who's having a great day, and then all of a sudden, because of your actions, they're having a complete shitty day, and it carries throughout the rest of their day. Now, a kindness on the road, letting someone merge in or something like that.
Right.
None of that is necessarily going to make a difference to everyone else around you, except that you're not causing harm. But making sure that you are being kind in your daily actions and making sure that you are treating people in the right way, it just opens up those opportunities to kind of spread that and spread some kindness and everything if you're capable. But if you're not capable of being kind one day, like, first of all, take a sick day if you can afford to. But but second of all, at least just put the energy out to not be rude, mean,
100%, 100%. And really notice that it does make a difference. When someone is kind to me, it feels really good.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I always try to give people compliments and say, like, oh, I love that shade of lipstick, or, oh, I love those boots, or, hey, what a nice jacket, or anything. I always try to compliment people on something that they have a choice in. I try not to compliment things that they're not going to have a choice in, eye color, hair color, body shape, anything like that. But, if it's something they have control over, oh, I love that purse. Oh, I love that umbrella, whatever it is, something really small. And as long as it's a genuine compliment, they're going to receive that. And that's a chance, first of all, for you to have a little more human connection in your day, but then also for you to spread a little bit of joy. Well, I'm going to, we're to our magic moment. So Chad will take a minute to ask if anyone has any questions that they haven't asked or they would like to. Feel free to pop those into the chat. We'll do our magic moment here and then we'll be wrapping up. So make sure to get your questions in if you have any that you haven't already asked. So if you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
Well, I probably already said it, but I'll say it again, that it takes tremendous courage and strength of character to really take a deep dive into your own healing process and be committed to yourself that you're going to live a better life and a happier life and a more fulfilled life through your own efforts and hard work that you do in therapy. I would love to eliminate all stigma. There's no shame, there's no blame, you're not less than, you're not inferior, you're not, not incapable, you're not incapable of helping yourself. It really is a gift to yourself and to give to everyone around you to do whatever healing work that you want to do and have access to do. And I hope that we can celebrate each other for that. So you're in therapy, fantastic, good for you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really something that we should all be working towards, I hope. Well, I'm going to post your socials one more time. And like I said, we are kind of wrapping up here. So Phyllis, I will turn it over to you and just ask if there's anything we didn't cover or anything that you want to share. I know that you have a book you want to make sure to share. So we can do that for sure. But anything else you want to talk about, I'll just give you the mic for a little bit.
Yeah, please go onto my website, phyllisleavitt.com, and contact me, get on my mailing list so I can update you with future offerings. I'd love to, speak if you have a speaking engagement, or if you just have a personal question, contact me. I'm happy to talk to anybody. and on Facebook and LinkedIn. My main social medias are LinkedIn and YouTube and my website, but I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And I would just love to show everybody my book, because this is the cover, and it's available for purchase on any of the major book outlets today. It's American Therapy, and so I hope you'll buy my book. I hope you'll review it. I hope you'll read it. I hope you'll be inspired to just have a greater understanding of our mental health issues and what is healing, and be a participant.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, if you go on to Phyllis's website and you buy the book wherever you want to buy it and everything, please go leave a review, throw a like on wherever you bought it. You would not believe how much of a difference a 5-word review can make for boosting visibility. Algorithms love engagement. So
Right.
go like, subscribe, whatever, follow on all those socials. It really will help Phyllis out. So make sure that you do that. And Phyllis, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you just taking the time out.
Thank you so much. You've been wonderful.
All right, chat, give me just a minute to disconnect with Phyllis, and we will be right back. We're going to be doing a little bit of gaming. I got to see if everybody's down, but stick around. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about why we all need therapy and the power of collective healing. As we reflect on what we've discussed, I want to leave you with this. Healing is not a destination, it's very much a journey. And whether you're just starting out or you've been on this path for a while, remember that every step you take towards prioritizing your mental health is a step in the right direction. So as you go about your day, remember to be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Reach out for support when you need it, and know that you are never alone in your struggles. Together, we can create a world where mental health is valued, understood, and celebrated. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. Your feedback helps me continue to grow. It helps me reach more listeners like you who are seeking that connection and the inspiration. And if you have any thoughts or questions or topics you'd like for me to cover in future episodes, I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me on social media or through the tacosfallapart.com website. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. And remember, even when life gets messy, even when tacos fall apart, we're all in this together. Thanks for listening.